Good evening and welcome to our meeting. This is our regular meeting for Monday, April 27th, 2026. It's 7 p.m. and we are at City Hall on 806 West Main Street. So I'd like to call the meeting to order at this time. And then Hannah, can I ask you to do our roll call?
I would be happy to. Commissioners present in establishing a quorum: Commissioners Bulk, Lowe, Walsh, and Wirch. Commissioners Dawkin and Lockhart are excused tonight.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a new commissioner here that is joining us for our first time tonight, so I would like to introduce Nick Wirch. Commissioner Nick Wirch.
Hi everybody, I'm Nick. I am also go by Nicholas sometimes. I come from a background in construction experience and planning all my life. It's been a favorite thing of mine since I was, well, before I could talk, and I definitely think I have some nice ideas that we can potentially incorporate into our future planning to better our society and make it a healthier and happier place to live, not that it isn't already.
Thank you very much. We look forward to having you join us and being part of our group.
Thank you.
I don't believe we have any public comments tonight, right? No public comments. Okay, so now on our agenda, we have the approval of our minutes from our February 9th meeting. Do we have any corrections to it? No?
I move that we approve the February 9th, 2026 Planning Commission minutes as is.
I'll second it.
Second.
Minutes have, the motion for the minutes have been approved.
Can I get a vote count?
Oh, we forgot to do that.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Thank you. That motion's been approved. Okay, so let's go on to old business. So we have critical areas regulations, update and workshop by Kate.
Thank you, Commissioner Lowe. Tonight is going to be a rather brief overview, but I just wanted to keep you up. I am slowly but surely making my way through these code amendments. So this evening, I'm going to go over just a handful of items. Perfect. So I have provided you a printout of the revised definitions. The things that you have not already seen are in the strike-through edit mode in red. The one item I do want to bring your attention to is you're going to start seeing the term riparian. That is because we are slowly moving away from streams to riparian management. That's one of the big changes that I have not gotten to. So you'll see quite a few definite, well, there's like 5 that begin with riparian. Protections and mitigations, I gave you the final draft of the critical aquifer areas, recharge areas, and again, this is brand new for our code. We do not have sole source water, and we do not have the public wellheads that require this higher level, but we have high septable and medium septable soils, and so we actually really do need to be protecting them. Next slide. So again, I've already let the cat out of the bag. So again, riparian is the big issue that we're going to be working towards, and the graphic on the right is from the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, and so this is really around fish, wildlife, conservation areas, and now all streams. And so we had to add in a bunch of definitions that we have not historically used, and hopefully I will be bringing you a brand new chapter on May 11th. Next slide. The next section I wanted to bring your attention to is in your packet. And I'm so sad that Kelsey's not here. This is something that she had brought to our attention during one of our last meetings with the Japanese knotweed. You actually need a chemical spray to kill that, and so I've actually entered in a new section. This will be going under protection and mitigation measures, and it does have the chemical applications that are permitted by a Department of Ecology. Next slide. So then back to the critical aquifer, I gave you a very clean copy of what the chapter now looks like, 2280-125. Again, this is a brand new section. You saw most of it at one of the previous meetings. The new information is revisions to section D, the uses that are, Yes, sections D and E have been revised. That's the permitted and prohibited sections. And then there's a brand new table, 30.62.340. That's at the end of the packet. And this talks about additional requirements for certain types of uses that are permitted within the downtown core. I'm not sure if you can see the map, but it's basically everything south of US 2 has the highest potential for contamination. So it provides additional regulations on uses that are interested in coming in and are already in the community. So with that, I also included in your packet my revised timeline. If all goes well, I will have my final draft put together by the end of this week. We'll see how that goes. It might run into next week. But anyway, my goal is to really get this going. The next step, in addition to the complete draft, is the document I've been explaining. Following the Department of Commerce checklist, it will have my own gap analysis and how I came to these conclusions, and then giving you all the citations for best available science as we're making the recommended changes. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions, take comments.
It's funny, when I was going through it, I had never heard of that word riparian before, so I had to like Google it and see what this even was. So that was kind of funny.
Yeah, I'll have a lot of graphics, so it explains what it is and the parts that we're protecting.
Any other questions? Tony?
Thank you. So previously, when we talked about non-conforming use, my mindset was always north of Highway 2, the residential development that is non-conforming. The south of Highway 2 is so well developed. And it just struck me that we're talking about a whole different type of non-conforming use than what was in my mind previously, considering the industrial development in the city. And so did that give you any different perspective on the language for non-conforming use? And I just realized this moments ago.
With the critical aquifer recharge?
Yeah.
It does not, excuse me, the non-conforming section is something that you have not seen yet. I've gone through and done another screening of it just to make sure we're capturing what already exists. It's not going to affect it if you're, the legal non-conforming doesn't change as long as it's there and it does not stop and it's not polluting. You could get into a code enforcement situation, but the uses are there, which when I come back to you will be part of my presentation for the riparian areas, because I think I explained before, Department of Fish and Wildlife has a completely different way of protecting these areas. And so looking at our city and where we have streams, a lot of it's already developed, which is a good thing from the regulations. So, but big picture, I think our legal non-conforming section of the Critical Areas Code addresses the concerns with the CARAs, or the Critical Aquifer Recharge Areas.
Do you anticipate many businesses being non-conforming that they already exist?
Oh yeah, basically any automotive repair, any gas station, some of the light industrial uses. What was the other one? Dry cleaning, the solutions they have, that's all south of US 2. So yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you, Kate. Okay, let's go on to new business. On 7.1, we had the review of the 2027 through 2032 capital improvement plan update, and that's going to be given to us by Jordan Ottow. Is that right?
Actually, I'm going to be giving that
Oh.
presentation. And I thank you, Kate. And I just saw that it says the host has disabled participant screen sharing. I said I would share, but maybe I should have let Hannah share. I could send it to you, Hannah. There's nothing worse than watching somebody have to work on their computer. Like, hey, I'm going to get it there. Well, we'll see who gets there first, Hannah. Did you get it? Oh, you did. Congratulations. It worked. All right. Well, I'm hoping for the slideshow, but maybe I'm not. Oh, from the beginning. Finally. Exceeded the technical abilities. Perfect. All right. Well, good evening. My name is Deborah Knight. I am the city administrator for the city of Monroe. And I have with me this evening Jordan Ottow. And Jordan, I'm sorry, I don't remember your title. What is your title?
Public Works Operations Manager.
There we go. And so Jordan and I are working together on the capital improvement plan this year. So I'm going to be presenting this evening, and we will be back in front of you next month, I believe, for the public hearing. So what I thought I would do this evening for the Planning Commission is just to walk you all through the basics of what is the Capital Improvement Plan. So CIP, Capital Improvement Plan 101, because I think this will give you the foundation that you need, that when Jordan and I come back to you for the public hearing, you'll have kind of a basic understanding, and you'll be able to provide more input then into the public hearing process. So the purpose of tonight's meeting, as I said, is to just give an overview of the capital improvement plan. This is not a final adoption. What we are going to do this evening, though, is review the criteria that is in the revised Code of Washington under the Growth Management Act. And there are several criteria that a capital improvement plan has to meet. It has to be consistent with the city's adopted comprehensive plan. So for those members of the Planning Commission that have been with the city for more than 2 years, you've been through a portion of that update to the city's 20-year planning document. So we're required, is it every 10 years now, to update our 20-year plan. And we're going to talk about how we go from having an idea about what we want the city to look like to actually implementing those ideas. That's what a capital facilities plan does. That's a 20-year plan. And the 6-year plan boils that down then into what we're looking at for the next 6 years. And then we boil that down even further in the adopted budget, and that's the 2-year budget. So that's where the rubber really meets the road, is in that 2-year budget. So we're this evening going to review the level of service, what are levels of service and what is concurrency and why is that important, and then financial feasibility, how do we ensure that we can plan for financially the projects that we need. So tonight what we're looking for is just again the introduction, any questions that planning commissioners might have, and then any direction that you want to provide to staff prior to coming back to you next month for the public hearing. So starting at the very top then, what is the Growth Management Act and what are the requirements of that act? So as I mentioned, the Growth Management Act was passed in 1990, and it was passed in response to what that time Washington State residents felt like was an influx of people coming in from the outside. And they didn't want Washington State to become another Southern California. So they wanted to plan ahead. And one of the things that they wanted to ensure was that there was going to be infrastructure in place to serve new growth as it occurred. And that's what the level of service standards and concurrency are all about. Communities get to establish, what kind of traffic impacts do they want to have? How many park acres do they want to have for their residents? So as new residents come in, new park acres or new roadways or new facilities can be built. That was really the purpose behind the Growth Management Act and the reason for capital facilities planning. So why does this matter? So what we need to ensure is that in the big picture that our capital projects, that we are planning ahead to afford them, right? We need to ensure that we have the financing plan in place in order that when impacts occur, that we've got funding available to mitigate those impacts. And that's what impact fees are all about. So the state legislature gave cities a number of tools in the toolbox in order to be able to raise revenue in order to be able to pay for those impacts. Now there are some constraints on those. We can't raise all of the revenue through impact fees. We have to also pay for those through existing revenue sources like property taxes, for example. So we're going to talk more about what those impact fees are. So the intent then of the 6-year CIP is to ensure that we're thinking ahead about the transportation and parks and facility projects we need to build to serve new development. We also need to ensure that major capital projects are spread out over time. That's why the 6-year CIP is important, because you can't just go and build a major roadway in a single year. It actually is a 3 to 5 year process to get a project done. This facility, this municipal campus, and this city hall here actually I think was 20 or 25 years in the making. The original plan for it happened in the early 2000s, and it took until 2025 before this building was built. There were a number of other improvements that were made, but this building itself was thought about 25 years ago before it was actually constructed. We need to ensure that we are identifying any funding gaps as we're looking ahead and saying what additional revenues do we need to raise. So for example, 2 years ago, the city went out for a park bond and levy measure. And the reason for that is that we can see that we are beginning to experience park deficiencies that can't be covered by existing revenues or by impact fees. And so we need to go to the voters, because that's our only other funding source, and ask for that funding in order to create those projects. That effort wasn't ultimately supported by voters, but it was part of our thinking ahead process. And then finally, the CIP creates transparency and accountability showing the community what long-term projects are needed. So if you go in and you take a look at the capital facilities plan that was provided in your packet, you can see that long list of projects that we're going to be working on over the next 6 years. The most important two columns in that table are the next 2 years, 27 and 28, because we're coming up on our 2-year budget, and those projects, we need to have specific funding identified, or they need to be pushed out into future years until funding is available for them. So any questions about the Growth Management Act or what it requires? All right. So key policy considerations and takeaways. Trying to move this out of the way. I didn't mean to press that. So the plan, the capital improvement plan, the 6-year capital improvement plan really reflects several policy trade-offs. One is keeping up with growth versus available funding, and we talked about that just a minute ago with the parks projects and trying to find funding in order to support park improvements. Addressing existing deficiencies. So as we are building things, we also need to be taking care of the things that we've already constructed. And one of the ways that we do that, for example, is through the voter-approved Transportation Benefit District. So when you buy something in Monroe, for example, there's an additional charge, a sales tax charge, that we collect that goes into the Transportation Benefit District, and that's what's used then to do all of the asphalt overlays that you see that happen every summer. So that's paid for with that voter-approved tax. And those are existing deficiencies. We're not creating any new roads, but we need to ensure that the roadway infrastructure that we have is going to continue to be maintained. We also need to consider the reliance that we have on grants. Grants are uncertain, but they are a really big portion of how we pay for street improvements and park improvements. And one of the challenges that we've had lately is that the state changed its criteria for park grants, and the city is no longer as competitive in those grant funds as we used to be. And so it's another reason why we're experiencing a greater level of deficiency now in our park system, because we're not able to receive grants in the way that we used to from the state. The key takeaways that we're looking for this evening is to ensure that the plan, the capital improvement plan, is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And you can do that check, and we'll be providing more information at the public hearing, so you can see the list of projects that are on the CIP, the capital improvement plan, and the list of projects that are in the city's 20-year comprehensive plan that are needed to implement that plan. And the idea behind the public hearing is that we need to ensure that as projects are completed, they get dropped off that 20-year list, so we show that we've completed them. But there are also new projects that come onto the list, right? New opportunities or new deficiencies that we have identified. And every year, as a part of this update, we need to be adding those new projects onto the list. And the reason for that is because oftentimes, in order to be eligible for grants at the state or federal level, you need to have that project on your capital facilities plan. So this is our opportunity once a year to update the plan so we can apply for grants for projects that we haven't previously identified, or for projects that have been on the list for a while. We also need to ensure that we are funding projects needed, again, to serve growth. So we need to ensure that those projects are on the list, and that it reflects both our ongoing commitments and our new priorities. So any questions about the key policy considerations or the takeaways? It's a lot to take in if you've never done this before. I haven't done this in a while, and I offered to pick it up in order to help out the Public Works Department because they're very busy right now, and I forgot how much work this was. I don't know that I would have offered. They said you could keep your capital improvement plan. Give me something else to work on. Oh, yes.
Curiosity, what's the change in criteria to make the city less competitive for grants for parks?
Yeah, excellent question. So the grants for parks come through the State Recreation and Conservation Office. And in 2021 and 2022, they added an equity criteria into the list of things. And the intent there is, and it's good intent, is to ensure that smaller and more marginalized communities, so smaller communities and more marginalized communities, are more competitive. What they found was, and this is no surprise, large cities, Seattle, Spokane, Bellevue, the larger cities, have a greater level of resources in order to be able to apply and be competitive for grants. And so they wanted to spread the state's money out more equitably across the state and across city size. And so we were very competitive for a very long period of time, and we've been less so more recently. And it has to do with the change in the criteria.
One thing I would emphasize, excuse me, in your presentation for the public hearing is the importance to have projects on the list to qualify for grants at all. You mentioned it several times, but I would really emphasize that for the public. Because when you look at that list, and especially for parks and transportation, and see how much secured funding there is, you wonder why you even have the things on the list unless you know that you cannot apply for grants unless they are on the list.
Yeah, it's a very good reminder. The other thing to keep in mind too is that sometimes there's just not an opportunity. And one of those projects is a project that we have started on, which is the downtown festival lot. So that project goes back into the 2005 is when that project originally showed up on the list. And it was on the list for 2 rounds of comprehensive plan updates. And finally, the opportunity arose where 2 properties became available both at the same time and both adjacent to one another, the Union Bank building and the adjacent chiropractor's office downtown at the intersection of Blakely and Main Street. And so because the project was on the capital facilities plan, we were able to purchase that property, acquire it, and we're also then submitting grant applications through the Recreation and Conservation Office, through the State Capital Project Fund, and through the federal government to help construct that project.
And one more point. In 1999, I ran for city council and was blessed to be elected. And the first thing they handed me when I was sworn in 2000 was the completed City Hall study. So it's more than, like I said, it was a completed study, not a proposed study.
Yeah, it takes a long time for some capital facilities to actually be constructed.
And they might even happen in your lifetime.
Sometimes surprising things do happen.
Yep.
So what I thought I would do for this presentation then is just walk through the requirements for a capital improvement plan that are in state law. That's what RCW stands for. It's Revised Code of Washington is what RCW means. And it's the compendium of state law, basically. So we're going to start with consistency with the comprehensive plan. And if you're on the Planning Commission, the comprehensive plan is something that you will hear about over and over again. If you hadn't had the opportunity to pick it up yet and take a look at it, it's certainly worth reviewing and reading. There's a lot of information that's in there, and it'll help you understand what you're working on the Planning Commission, because that really drives everything that we do. At that and new state laws drive everything we do. All right, so what is the difference between the capital facilities plan, which is the 20-year plan, and the 6-year capital improvement plan? They get confused a lot. So you can think about these as basically 2 layers. So the capital facilities plan is all of the projects that are needed to implement the vision in the comprehensive plan. That's the whole purpose behind it. It's like where the rubber actually meets the road. So if you're a person like me that prefers doing over planning, sorry to say that, the capital improvement plan or capital facilities plan is where you live, because that's actually where things get done. It's not just pie in the sky planning, it's what actually occurs. And so that's why it's important. And the CIP is the first 6 years of the capital facilities plan. That's why it needs to be amended every year, is that 6-year plan needs to be updated. projects get completed, new projects get added, or projects take longer than we think, and so they need to be, pushed out longer. Maybe right-of-way acquisition isn't going as quickly as we want. So those projects have to stay on the plan, but they just have to get pushed out into the outer years. Or there's a project that we thought we were going to get grant funding for, that grant didn't come through, and so again, it needs to be pushed out 2 years for the next 2-year grant cycle. So it basically bridges that long-term planning with the near-term implementation. So the capital facilities plan has to include an estimated costs and the methods of financing those, even if the method is grants or other funding sources. Oftentimes we don't know what the funding source is going to be. You need a capital facilities plan before we can impose impact fees. So we can't charge developers with the impact of new construction for new people coming into this community unless we have a capital facilities plan that says these are the deficiencies that we have that are going to be caused by growth, and this is how much we're going to charge each new household in order to pay for that growth. Does that, I think that makes sense to everybody kind of intuitively. And it is required before we can charge certain taxes like real estate excise taxes. So we can only collect REIT, which is a portion of the sale of every property. It's one of the financing tools the state gave cities in order to pay for mitigated growth, is real estate excise tax. It used to be very restrictive. The state has recently, again, broadened the use of real estate excise tax. It used to be just for capital improvements, but the state is beginning to recognize that the 1% growth limitation we have on property taxes means that we're falling further and further behind in being able to fund some projects. And so they now allow us to use that funding source not just for capital projects, but also for maintenance and operations. I mentioned the CIP is the first 6 years of the capital facilities plan. It identifies specific projects and timing and funding. And I have to be clear, the CIP capital improvement plan is not the budget. We adopt a 2-year budget, and as part of that budget, there's an operating budget and there's a capital budget. And so eventually the capital budget aligns with the first 2 years of the CIP. It's the other reason why we amend the CIP as part of the budget process, is to ensure that we're not out of alignment and that everything comes together. So any questions? Okay. So next we're going to talk about levels of service and concurrency. So the table that you see, I was going to say, I don't know if you can read that, but the table that is on the right, I took straight out of the city's comprehensive plan, out of Chapter 8, which is the capital facilities element of the comprehensive plan. That element is supposed to bring together all of the different types of capital projects that we're doing. So it's parks and streets and trails, stormwater, water sewer utilities, capital facilities, the municipal campus buildings, all of those things come together. So that table I took straight out of there. I also pulled out again, I think it's always helpful for people when you're thinking about levels of service. Some things are easy to understand, like 4.7 acres per 1,000 people. I think you can divide the number of people in Monroe and look to see how many acres of parks do we have and do we have enough parks. Levels of service for transportation, I think, are a little less intuitive because it has to do with how delayed you are in traffic. And the trade-off for levels of service is, if you have a really high levels of service, let's say, for example, we had 20 acres per 1,000 residents, that means that we would have to collect more in impact fees, right, from each new household or residence that was developed. And so you're always trying to weigh out affordability for housing with how much are you collecting, right? I mean, that is the trade-off. You could have a level of service A in transportation, meaning your roadways are free and clear, but think about how wide your roads would need to be, right? Think about how high those transportation impact fees would have to be in order to pay for a roadway system where nobody was ever delayed. And so over time, what has happened, and this has happened in Monroe too, as things have become more crowded, we keep lowering our levels of service, right? We're more interested, I think, in trying to maintain affordable housing right now than we are for sitting in a congested roadway system. So those are always the trade-offs. You also have to be conscientious about the other governments that are responsible for things like roadways. So the Washington State Department of Transportation, for example, I don't believe they have a standard. Do they? Oh, do they have a standard? Is it LOSF, level of service F?
No.
Is it higher than F?
Their standard is, their level of service standard is D.
Oh, D.
And
Oh,
it's
I
a
see
little
that
bit
there.
different than the cities. The thing about the state is if their road is starting to fail, that does not mean the city of Monroe cannot approve development.
That's,
So just keep that in mind. And again, for our city, that is US 2, SR 522, and SR 203. Those are all state regulated roads, maintenance, which are the ones that you most frequently hear frustration with.
And I don't believe they collect impact fees, right? The state does not collect impact fees.
That's correct. That's only done at the local level. Cities and counties. And on the impact fees, there is a reciprocal agreement between Snohomish County and the city of Monroe because we share some of the same road infrastructure. Our community goes through Snohomish County, and some Snohomish County residents come into Monroe and vice versa. So there's an agreement to help with that.
And I believe the way that Monroe collects its impact fees is it's citywide, so it's not dedicated to a specific project.
That is correct. The way the city of Monroe does it is, actually Deborah captured it really nicely, is in the big 20-year plan, we identify all of the projects that are currently needed. Impact fees cannot pay for existing deficiencies. It's only the additional needs as the community grows. So, and impact fees cannot pay the 100% of that cost. It's only a portion. So, where was I going with this? Hold on here. Impact fees, portion, pieces, state.
I think you covered it.
Huh? Yeah. I'll get back to that thought. Anyway, yes.
So in short then, levels of service, it actually defines the minimum standard for how the city provides services to the community. That's the minimum standard. And it can be quantitative or qualitative and is used to evaluate system performance. So when we run models, and we have a transportation model and utility models, they will use the adopted levels of service to determine what roads are going to be deficient and then how much in impact fees can we collect. So that's how impact fees are calculated. Impact fees are an important, revenue source for the capital improvement plan for both parks and transportation. So as it says here, the parks levels of service is 4.75 acres per thousand. And the level of service for transportation is C for the collector roads, so the little roads that are in your neighborhood, and then D for all of the arterials, which are the larger streets. Is Chain Lake Road, I believe that's a collector still, correct? It's a collector street, yep. So that's level of service C. And you'll see Chain Lake Road on the capital improvement plan, because as you know, we've had a lot of growth and development up in that area of the city. We've collected impact fees in order to pay for that, in order to mitigate for that growth. And we're going to be starting on that project in the next several years, although I anticipate that it's probably going to be 5 to 7 years before we'll see that project potentially completed.
Tony.
thank you. On the level of service for parks, 4.75 acres per 1,000 residents, how does that compare to other cities? especially cities of our size.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question, so I'd have to come back with that information and see.
Because I remember going back years that we were like in the top 5 cities in Western Washington per acres per resident.
Acres per resident, yes. So we, I believe right now have like 16.67 acres per resident, but that's different than your adopted levels of service. Remember, that's the minimum standard.
Right, right.
So we currently have more acres than the minimum that's required. And I think too, I don't know that it's stated here. It's not stated here, but I know well, I'll double check. I'll come back with more information.
One of the reasons I
About
raised
parks
that issue
otherwise.
is that parks are a key attractive to new residents. And knowing that we have one of the comprehensive park systems in Western Washington, I think it'd be a great asset to advertise.
Yes, and I would say the
Of course, we
challenge,
have-
the challenge that we have there is not the number of park acres that we have. It's actually on the maintenance and operations
Yes,
side
I
of the
realize
house,
that.
right? It's our community. We've not made a compelling argument to the community that they should pay more to support their parks. And so parks lives off of sales tax revenue and property taxes and utility taxes, the same as the police department and a number of other departments. And so it's a very limited source of funding. And I think that's the bigger challenge. It's not that we couldn't keep adding park acres, it's that we're not going to be able to maintain them.
One of the reasons I raised that issue is because I know maintenance is one of the key issues, and not knowing the minimum compared to how many acres we have per thousand, that I was just curious to see if we're going to be adding more acres of park that we have a difficult time maintaining. I would say one of the issues of getting support of maintaining the park is because our park system does an exceptional job with the resources they have. And so people say, what? They look great?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my opinion.
Yeah, that's a very difficult conversation to have too, because you can, if your parks are then neglected, people would say, well, why should we invest in them if the city's already not maintaining them? So it's a fine balance. More to come on parks maintenance and operations and park improvements, because there's going to be a continued conversation about how can we go back to the voters. So any questions? Oh,
Commissioner Wirsch?
Hi, Kate. So you had mentioned that the limit on impact fees, it's not 100% covered technically, right? So in theory, is there a kind of a guideline that other cities have gone through on a percentage of coverage?
State law.
Okay.
State law says that cities can charge a certain percentage of the impacts coming from new growth, but you are not allowed to charge 100%, and you cannot use that money for existing deficiencies.
Is there kind of a general guideline towards the percentage you could use?
I will go look, kind of like Deborah, I need to go back and look, because that information is actually in our transportation plan, and I believe it's also in the park plan, which we'll find Tony's answer as well for the acres per person of what is recommended versus what we have.
Thank you.
Commissioner Balk?
Thank you. I have an in-depth knowledge of school impact fees from past activities. And they would do a whole calculation of what the impact fee would do, and they would say it's X, and then they would do a 50% discount. And I'm not positive, but I think many of our impact fees are discounted, and there's a whole rationale for that. School districts are at 50%. While I was on city councils, we only had a 25% discount, and over an 8-year period, that meant the school district collected more than $1 million than if they had a 50% discount. So anyway, but that's a choice the city makes, and I'll stop it at that point.
yes, setting impact fees is always a really interesting policy discussion,
Yes.
because again, you're weighing, right, how much are you collecting versus, what's affordable, and it changes. So if you're in a period of recession, for example, when there's little housing going on, there's always a strong pressure on the part of development community to lower those impact fees, because housing is difficult to sell and prices need to come down. Anyway, that is always part of the policy discussion that council has. All right, so moving on then, we'll talk a little bit more about levels of service and it should have been how our projects identified is next. So still talking about levels of service and concurrency. So how are projects identified? Well, what we typically do is we take an inventory of all of our existing capital facilities. So what do we currently have in place? And then we forecast, well, what does the future need based on our levels of service? We talked about for transportation, for example, we have a model, a transportation model that's run, and they say, well, if you have level of service D or level of service E, what does that mean for your transportation system? And then what is the shortfall? And then we identify then the 6-year financing plan. So where is it that we're going to find the funding to support these projects? And then where do all the projects come from? If there is one thing we have at local government, it is plans. We have lots and lots of plans. You'll hear that coming from the planning department. That's their job, is to think ahead about where we're coming from. So if you take a look at the city's 20-year comprehensive plan, you'll see that we have plans for each one of our utilities. They're multi-page documents. There are always state requirements that we have to meet in order to get those plans approved at the state level. We have a transportation plan, a park and recreation open space plan. That plan we're going to update. We have to update it every 6 years in order to be eligible for grants. So that update is going to begin next year in 2027 because it needs to be adopted in 2028. These plans require lots of analysis and lots of public outreach to get public input on what is it that people want, and all of that effort takes typically 9 to 12 months to complete. So if we've got something that's due in March of 2028, we're going to start it in January of 2027. It's just the way the planning cycle goes. We also have a facilities assessment. So we talked earlier about this municipal campus assessment. We also did a recent assessment of our police facility, and out of that came a list of potential projects and potential improvements. When we get into talking about the actual dollar amounts, you'll see that the majority of the facilities budget needed is actually to support that new police facility. I think the police facility that we have now was built in the 1990s. I want to say mid-1990s, correct? And then last but not least, cross-department coordination. Kate will tell you that most of what she did when we were updating the comprehensive plan was working with other departments. So a lot of close collaboration between planning, public works, and parks. Our finance department also gets involved, obviously, in these discussions because it's the finance department that's doing kind of the forecasting. Every year we provide to the city council, not every year, as part of the budget process every 2 years, we provide to the city council a revenue forecast. And so the revenues that we're talking about this evening are a part of that forecast. The council also, I haven't talked about this, but we have a vision statement, of course, and we also have a strategic plan that we update every 2 years. And so you'll see a lot of these bigger projects are part of that strategic plan. So it goes comprehensive plan, capital facilities plan, strategic plan, 2-year budget, right? And so it just kind of funnels down then into the projects that you see. So you can't say that we don't think ahead because we do. We plan ahead a lot. It's what we mostly do here. So financial feasibility, then looking at the actual 6-year plan. I really appreciate our city engineer, Scott Peterson, put together this really nice table that shows the funding sources. Again, it's hard to read. I don't know if I can, no, that made it worse. There we go. Can't pull that up for you. But it does list out real estate excise tax, grants, and impact fees. And then, what is the gap that we need? So the 6-year CIP has to show kind of the financial feasibility. and what projects are expected to be funded and delivered. Not all of the projects have identified funding at this stage, and that's somewhat purposeful. As we talked about earlier, sometimes projects need to be on the list in order for us to apply for grants. Let me take a sip of water. So the CIP includes, all of the anticipated needs, but some of those projects, like we said, are still dependent upon grants or, a voter-approved bond measure, for example, if it's part of a parks project. It may also be the council still hasn't, completed all of their policy decisions. The police facility is one of those. We still have another assessment we need to do to see how we could fit that police facility on this site. So it's on the list, but we haven't yet figured out exactly where it's going to be. We have a cost estimate for it, but not a final cost. And then it's also important to note that some projects that need to be included in the plan have to be there in order to be eligible for certain types of funding, like real estate excise tax, right? We can't use REIT for something that is supposed to be in response to a growth need unless it's part of the capital facilities plan, because that's what the plan is supposed to be for, identifying the gap between where we are now and the level of service standards that we need to maintain. Any questions? All right. So a snapshot. So once we get down to it, what do the numbers look like? And as you can imagine, they're fairly large numbers. It's a 6-year plan, and I think I talked about the facilities. We said 63 million. So I think about 53 million of that is the new police facility, and so 10 million of it are other improvements. Some of them are short-term improvements, like we need to replace generators, and those are kind of the large facility generators that you see on site. Evidence room, Sally Port, HVAC systems, yeah, some big projects, and those are just the maintenance items, right? So, this building here is brand new. It's going to be good for, probably 5 years, but between 5 and 10 years, some of the systems in this facility are going to have to be replaced, and they'll have to be added on to the capital improvement plan or capital facilities plan in order for us to do that. So as I mentioned, the total, you can see it, 205 million. The largest share, as we talked about, is facilities, just over 30%. Obviously, transportation and parks are the next biggest system. We're extremely fortunate because the city residents approved the sales tax to support the transportation benefit district, so that pays for the majority of the maintenance projects. It doesn't pay for new streets, so a portion of that transportation budget is dedicated, for example, to widening out Chain Lake Road, for example, right? So creating new capacity as opposed to just maintaining. Same thing with parks. We've got a number of park projects. We've been working to acquire some additional property adjacent to Sky River Park, and that's on the long-range plan, has been for a while. We've also purchased parkland. We talked about the festival lot. We also have a park that is up off 190th North Hill Park. That is just right now an open field, but the intent, of course, is to develop it into a neighborhood park over time as funding becomes available. The easiest projects to fund are the utility projects, because your utility rates actually pay for the capital improvements needed both for new capacity and for maintenance. So there is a portion of your utility rates that pays for not just the maintenance and operations and, for example, the water that we purchase, but it also pays for the capital improvements that are needed. Any questions about the 6-year snapshot? All right, so funding sources we've talked a little bit about, and I have some estimates that came again from the Public Works Department, just about the different types of projects that we have and the funding sources that are available to them. I think the biggest challenge with funding sources is it's always like a game of Tetris, which means that almost all of the revenue sources that we have are extremely limited. And so, for example, real estate excise tax, we plan to receive about $1.2 million in real estate excise tax in 2025, and another $1.2 million in 2026. So combined for the 2 years, that's only $2.4 million, and that has to pay for, park improvements and some street improvements. It is the most and facility improvements. So you can see how limited our revenue sources are in comparison to the need. And it's one of the things that we'll bring back to you at the public hearing, is to show you how much revenue we're anticipating to receive over the 6 years compared to what the expenditures that we've identified for that same period of time. And you'll get a much better understanding of the significant gap and why it is, we are constantly looking for ways to fund these projects. We do a remarkable job, and we should probably share this, just the percentage of grant funding that we receive. Again, we're very competitive for transportation projects. The signal at 147th Avenue and 179th, right by the hospital, for example, almost entirely funded by grants. All of the sidewalk improvements you see along 179th, almost entirely funded by grants. So kudos to our Public Works Department, our design and engineering team, Scott Peterson, our city engineer, for being able to really leverage the city's limited resources in order to continue transportation improvements. It's just a shame we're not able to do that with parks anymore.
Commissioner Balk?
Thank you. On parks, we have capital facilities, but some of that is improvement, or not improvement, replacing worn-out equipment and such. Is there a way to separate out those two capital improvements for an education moment for the public that, hey, we have parks that exist and we're going to need X amount of millions of dollars to replace worn-out equipment, and here is our funding for that? That it would be an opportunity as we go through this and other public to educate the public to say, hey, our parks look beautiful, but over the next 6 years, we're going to need X millions of dollars to replace the existing equipment, not develop new parks, but just the existing parks, and this is our funding source.
Yes, and it's something we've talked about internally, is, what is the best way to organize that type of community education. And to your point, right, it's every opportunity that we have to try and help people understand, what do we have now, what do we need for just to maintain the existing, and then, if you're interested in having more parks in your neighborhood, for example, what is it going to cost to have that additional park infrastructure? And I know that Mayor Cutterback and the senior leadership team are talking about, some kind of more strategic way, so bringing together community members, similarly to what the school district did, right, with their facility, helping educate a group of community leaders, and then asking that group to make some recommendations about how we should go about closing these gaps.
I have a quick question. On the CIP dollar figures that get, I know it's 6 years, but get broken down, like you were saying, so much for 2025, 2026. So do those figures are what go into the city budget?
It is the other way around. It will be the city budget that, when it gets adopted, will amend the CIP.
Okay.
Yep. So we have to first be constrained by what's available, what do we think the future looks like, and right now that crystal ball is pretty cloudy. It is really hard to tell where we're headed, and we are impacted the same as everybody else with the cost increases for everything, right? For every operations that we have, the cost of fertilizer, the cost of gas, all of that impacts us and means that there is less money available for other things. Yeah, we've been extremely conservative with the way that we have put together the budget, which is good in some sense, but it also means that there's just not much to look forward to, except for, I think, like all of us, right? I mean, there's nothing there's no whiz-bang stuff in the budget right now, right? We have to wait for better times in order for that to happen. It's just part of the economic cycle, right? Things go up and down, and we adjust accordingly. And right now, we're in a saving mode instead of in a spending mode.
Thank you.
All right, so project timelines. I mentioned this early on. Capital projects take a long time from inception to completion. This building took 25 years. The festival lot was about the same. I don't know, Jordan, you probably have a better idea. What's the fastest project we've put together? We could do utility projects in 3 years, typically, if there's just a replacement.
Yeah, I guess I would just like AC pipe replacements usually. Those are planned, designed, and they're not super expensive. We can handle a number of those in certain projects. So water replacement, sewer replacement, stuff like that. Those typically are more on the 3-year side than longer.
Yeah, I always say it's design, permitting, construction. That's each one of those phases takes a year to complete. That's, it just is it's what it takes. And I would say too, in my experience, I've worked for a number of communities, and this Public Works Department is remarkably efficient. They are probably the most well-managed Public Works Department I've had the privilege of working with. So if the project can get done in a short amount of time, this group could do it. We do a lot of stuff in-house too. I mean, we do most of our utility design work is in-house. We don't outsource it. I've worked for some communities where you just don't have the capacity to be able to have kind of a full-on engineering team, and those projects have to be outsourced like everything else. But if you're talking about a park playground replacement or a facilities, those are all being outsourced. I think we do the majority of our overlays are all in-house. I mean, we contract out for the work, but the specs are all put together in-house.
Yeah, we do like our crack sealing, and we'll do street patching. So we'll do a lot of that stuff in-house. We'll do some water replacement, some sewer replacement, but the bigger stuff, overlays stuff, that's contracted out.
One thing we have gotten more strategic on is using state and federal money. So federal money went away for a long period of time. The Congress got rid of earmarks. Now they call them congressional discretionary spending or something like that, or directed spending, something along those lines. But earmarks came back about 4 years ago, and so we recently have received a number of federal grants. That's both good and bad. Federal grants take a lot of time and energy to manage. They're almost, unless they're really big dollars, it's not worth it, just because the paperwork is so intense. But state grants are really helpful, and we generally tend to get one of those a year. So right now we have one that we're using to replace the artificial turf at Rotary Park. That turf has way outlived its usefulness. If you go out there now, it's shameful because, it's basically like an old carpet, that's just starting to wrinkle. And so that project is finally moving forward for replacement. The things that we have been doing in-house recently with some of our real estate excise tax for parks are replacing old playground structures. So we've done Blueberry, Curryview, and Whale Street is next. And we've been on kind of a regular cycle. But I don't know that money is going to be available for the next 2 years. We may have to put that kind of regular cycle replacement on pause just because we won't have the real estate excise tax available to do it. All right, so we're back to where we started, which is the purpose of tonight's meeting. You all have now had the Capital Facilities Plan, Capital Improvement Plan 101. And we will be back next month for the public hearing with more of the nitty-gritty details about the numbers and the projects.
Thank you. Any other comment? No? Okay, well, thank you very much for that. And now we're going to go on to the commissioners and staff's comments. So let's start with staff. Kate, do you want to start?
I actually don't have anything for you this evening. We're still on track Amy is still working on the 2025-26 docket, so she'll be coming back to you pretty quickly. The only item that is, they're all map amendments, 3-year corrections, and then the Davis UGA expansion, so that'll be coming back pretty quickly. Anita is still working on the middle housing. We'll be coming back. Actually, middle housing is finished here. No, I'm getting that confused. We have like 3 different housing things going on right now. She'll be coming back with the middle housing. Again, we'll be focusing on cottage development and then the different density and types of housing permitted in the residential 7 units per acre designation and the residential 15 units per acre. Those are our 2 more single-family zones. And then before the end of the year, Leanne is still working on the project list for Phase 2 code cleanup. So still busy, and I don't know what happened, but our current planning workload exploded, which is good. We've had a significant increase in accessory dwelling units, which I know is something of interest for Commissioner Bulk. With the changes that happened last year where you don't have to reside in one or the other, the covenant restrictions and the size restrictions, we've seen a significant change. Trying to think of other stuff going on. So that's it, just busy and looking forward to seeing you pretty much from here on through the rest of the year. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Deborah, did you have anything you wanted to add? Do you have anything, Jordan, that you would like to add?
No, I don't. Thanks a lot for having us tonight.
Sure. Glad you were here. Commissioner Worth.
I just wanted to thank you guys for putting these presentations together and allowing us to get in on this information.
Again, thank you for, I know it's a lot of work to do all this stuff and do these presentations. In the last couple of years, we've had a lot of subjects that are pretty dry that we've been talking about. So, you know, the critical areas and then the capital improvements, it's not quite as dry, so it's kind of nice to hear some of this. So thank you. Again, I guess that's it for me.
Thank you for the great presentation. You did an excellent job. I also appreciate the new traffic light on 179th Avenue. Was that a grant? And as I was reading tonight's packet at home, I thought about that. I drive down 179th Avenue, and I remember when it went on back in the early 2000s on the transportation capital projects. And it just explains the importance of having it on, because eventually we got a grant. It took over 20 years, but we got it.
Hannah, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Recently, I enjoyed the Odd Mall Sprung event at the fairgrounds. There were a lot of really great Monroe artists and artisans there. So if you ever have the chance to go to an Odd Mall event, I highly recommend them. And also, the Ward Roney Jr. VFW Post 7511 are going to be having their veteran grave cleanup event at the IOF Cemetery on May 9th. It's a really great event. I help with a lot of the education on proper grave maintenance, and it's a really great way to get in there with our local VFW and support them. So that's all.
Just wanted to remind you, Mary should be online.
Oh, I completely forgot. Mary, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Hi, everyone. No, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, just thank you for the great presentation tonight, and welcome, Nick. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, well, I guess that is it for tonight. So I'm going to adjourn tonight's meeting at 8:09. Thank you.